joining us, and Kay Montgomery is the chair of this panel, so she will take it from here.
All right, so hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm a naturally loud talker. So this panel will address the racial and religious issues facing Mormons who have come of age after the 1978 revelation. Dr. Rugh will address the sociology and race in Mormonism and how this impacts its young black members. The remaining panelists will detail their generation's experience in the LDS Church and consider how America's current racial and religious climate influences their faith. So we'll just go through introductions, and then, well, I'll tell you how we're going to do the panel, right? So we'll do introductions. Dr. Rugh will do a presentation, and then after that, each of our panelists will have 15 minutes to respond or just talk about their experiences. And then what we really want to make sure we have time for in our in this session is to leave the time for you guys to ask questions so we can kind of dialogue with the audience, if that makes sense. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Foster, who isn't quite here yet, but once he gets here, we'll just come right up on the stage. If you guys see him, just say, go to the stage. Just tell him to come on to the stage. Dr. Robert Foster is a graduate of Ricks College in BYU Provo. At Ricks College, he was the Black Student Union President and Ricks College Man of the Year in the year 2000. At BYU, he served as the Vice President of the Black Student Union, Vice President of Student Council, and Student Body President. Oh, a little bit of representation. Clap for me! Clap! If I learned anything from Dr. Martin, right, he's like, clap for me. Oh, because he's right here. Okay, gotcha. I was like, you guys are really happy about him being Black Student Union President. Okay. Vice President of Student Council and the Student Body President, becoming the first African-American president in the school's history. Dr. Foster received his doctorate from Salis University in Elkins Park, PA. He is the owner and CEO of Legacy Eye Care. Dr. Foster has served in the LDS Church as a full-time missionary in the Great California Arcadia Mission, gospel doctrine teacher, youth leader, ward mission leader, primary worker, elders quorum president, and high counselor. He currently serves in the North Carolina Raleigh South State Presidency as a second counselor. Welcome, Dr. Robert Foster. Phylicia Jimenez is a convert of 10 years to the LDS Church. She has served in many callings, including YSA representative, full-time missionary, Relief Society teacher, Young Women's secretary, Sunday school teacher, primary teacher, and Relief Society president. She served, what don't she do? What don't she do, girl?
I ain't never been a bishop.
She studied and graduated from Brigham Young University, Idaho, with a degree in fashion design and holds a master's degree in education. She currently teaches high school English language arts. She is an activist and enjoys spending time with her family and loved ones. Join me in welcoming Phylicia Jimenez. Dr. Jacob S. Rugh is Associate Professor of Sociology at Brigham Young University, where he joined the faculty in 2012. Dr. Rugh received a dual master's degree in Public Affairs and Urban and Regional Planning and a PhD in Public Affairs from Princeton University. His research focuses on race, neighborhood, space, and immigration with an emphasis on housing segregation and ownership. His work has been featured in The Atlantic, 538, National Public Radio, and the New York Times. Dr. Rugh teaches courses on the sociology of race and ethnicity, urban sociology, and a capstone seminar on race and immigration. He also consults on fair lending civil rights cases, and his work has been cited in several U.S. Supreme Court cases. He is the winner of the John Hope Franklin Prize for the best article on racism and the law based on his work on the landmark case of Baltimore versus Wells Fargo. At BYU, Dr. Rugh is actively involved in advocating for DACA and immigrant students, recruiting and mentoring faculty of color, and contributing to BYU's Civil Rights Seminar, Africana Studies Program, and Black History Month panels on race and racism today. So I will start my timer on.
Who are you?
I'm Kay Montgomery. We got to give Jacob Rugh his time because he was like, I want 26 minutes. I'm like, you get 25 minutes. I'm Kay Montgomery. I originally was born in Los Angeles, but really was raised down south. I have a BS in Human Development from the University of Utah, so I did my 2.5 years in Utah. I have a master's, well, I'm getting a master's degree in probably about 3 weeks in school counseling from the University of Redlands. Thank you. You guys are such a supportive group. So I've served in the church as primary president twice, a counselor in Young Women's, a Relief Society counselor, a war missionary, and currently I teach 13-year-olds in Sunday school. So pray for me on that. So we'll go with Jacob.
Thank you, Kay, for that introduction, the opportunity to be on this panel. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you to the students who showed up, because you always show up. In their award-winning book, The Asian American Achievement Paradox, sociologists Jennifer Lee and Min Jo find that success frames of Black, white, and Mexican Americans sometimes overlap with Asian Americans and are sometimes unique. One overlap may surprise you. Black Americans and Asian Americans universally see a college degree as a marker of success. Lee and Jo tell the stories of Malcolm and Cynthia. Malcolm was a pioneer, the lone black student in a gifted and talented class without black peers or role models. He found himself in prison, caught up in the mass incarceration system, then got a second chance after release. Though seen as gifted, Malcolm lacked community and never received a college degree. Cynthia was raised in Compton and later earned a PhD. However, Cynthia confessed that she did not yet feel successful and would not until she was able to be a role model for other black people who face similar barriers. No other racial group has espoused this uniquely black success frame. Malcolm was a pioneer without community who nonetheless felt successful. While his humility is admirable, we feel a degree of righteous indignation that he did not attain his full potential. On paper, Cynthia clearly succeeded, but will not feel successful until she can help her community. We might conclude that it is good that Malcolm and Cynthia were pioneers, and it was better that Cynthia will help the community that Malcolm never had. While pioneer is good and community is better, and both are vital, what is best? What else might be added so that the next generation will not suffer from the burden of being a token or the weight of their entire race? Today I will make 3 arguments. First, I will argue that we need to recenter the black LDS experience 40 years after the 1978 revelation and analyze it using the sociological theory of a black culture, minority culture of mobility in the post-civil rights era, full of its contradictions and challenges and promise. Second, I will argue that community is a vital source of identity and support for blacks who navigate white spaces such as BYU. I will show how community has evolved beyond a survival tool and is expanded to include other people of color and whites who share a distinctive racial success frame. Third, I will argue that while commemorating pioneers and strengthening community are essential, we must also shift our racial paradigm. What is that paradigm? Bad doctrine, right? Things that we have heard today. In order, as Russell Ballard instructed, to eliminate racism and prepare for a more multiracial future that is already the present. This paradigm shift must lead to systemic change and racial justice. Let me start with the minority culture of mobility perspective. Put simply, the black middle class experience does not equal the white middle class experience. Blacks must navigate racism and class relations with their more heterogeneous networks of friends and family. This theory echoes Black Picket Fences by Mary Patillo, influential book which chronicles Chicago's racially isolated black middle class, and Barrios to Burbs by Jody Vallejo. Vallejo finds that Mexican-American middle class more often follows the black experience than the white one, with uniquely Mexican-American elements. While the conventional white wisdom, white wisdom, holds that minorities could or even should adopt a white identity to become fully American, these works challenge us not only to decouple economic and racial assimilation, but to also center our analysis on the black experience, not the white experience. 2 generations post-civil rights, the black middle class is the largest it has ever been. Most blacks live in the suburbs, and 3/4 of black families live above the poverty line. As Elijah Anderson argues, middle-class black professionals are viewed by whites as the exception when they are in fact the rule. Research shows that upper status blacks face more racism due to their increased contact with whites and must develop strategies to deal with the racial cost of success, the coping mechanisms that we talked about in today's earlier panel. As alluded to earlier, 2 critical implications emerge. Black Americans display a sense of linked fate and a corresponding racially distinctive success frame. Here are a few examples of black Americans from John Hope Franklin to Heather McGhee, who all hail from Chicago, where I was also raised in a majority black middle-class context exposed to the black success frame, which with each generation comes greater incorporation into the white mainstream and increased capacity to realize the black success frame. Historian John Hope Franklin was a pioneer employing the best objective methods, but he was never neutral, which was morally impossible. And I tell my students the exact same thing. I'm going to use the best objective methods, but I will never be neutral when it comes to racism. Michelle Obama posed questions of pioneer identity in her thesis on black Princeton alumni who were in the white mainstream. Heather McGhee also hails from the South Side with elite credentials from Yale and UC Berkeley. McGhee is an effective paradigm shifter, making a convincing argument that racism in politics today harms white America and not just black America. If we center the black LDS timeline on 1978, we also find ourselves about 2 generations from the granting of full membership, at least officially, to Black Latter-day Saints. We can apply the minority cultural mobility approach to the Black Latter-day Saint experience. A black LDS middle-class minority identity has taken hold with increased movement into white spaces inside and outside the LDS Church. The black middle class navigates tricky racial and class dynamics that were highlighted in this morning's panel. Black Latter-day Saints must further manage the race, class, and religious relations. Compared to white members, black members are far more likely to have family and friends who are not LDS. If white Americans as the dominant group are able to isolate themselves in white neighborhoods, white schools, and white networks, the pinnacle of white LDS privilege is to embed oneself with nearly all white LDS neighbors and nearly all white LDS networks, which is impossible for Black Latter-day Saints. Countless role models have taught me and shown me the black success frame. At church, my father, pictured here with Victor Soyle, his counselor, Kathy Stokes, and way too many others to name, all of these leaders ensured that every presidency was led by a black member or had black counselors, every single one, so that each child would see black members as leaders. Our congregation became one of the most integrated of any faith in Chicago in the 1980s and 1990s. When I recently met with Jabari Parker earlier this month, who grew up in the same congregation the following decade, he expressed sincere gratitude for racially integrated leadership and ward, telling me how it made a difference to him as a black member and as a black man in America. And I use the term black because where I grew up, everybody said, Jake, you get to be white, so we get to be just black. Black LDS members have pioneered change, built community, and shifted racial paradigms. They have not simply overcome barriers and reached across divides, they have broken barriers and closed divides. And I don't have Alice's picture here, but her progress report proves that she has done that too. Working in multiracial alliances, many of those pictured here have ended racist institutional policies and practices inside and outside the LDS Church. As Kirsty, my former TA in attendance here, wrote in the LDS Ensign magazine, "Time's up on seeing black members as outsiders. When they are accepted into selective institutions, we should congratulate them, instead of replying that they were admitted, quote, just because you're black." This incident is not an isolated one, and has happened to dozens and dozens of others from the accomplished black LDS third generation. Understanding the black LDS culture of mobility helps us, prevents us from making what should be the happiest days of black members' lives the most traumatic ones. Black saints are adopted into this sense of linked black pioneer fate, intersecting with other identities, such as gender, nationality, multiraciality, Latinx identity, and so on and so forth. Evidence of a vibrant and diverse culture of black LDS mobility can be found in the commemoration gatherings organized by the Black LDS Legacy Committee leadership this year. After attending, one consistent theme that emerged was that blacks cannot do all the work in eradicating racism on their own, which is precisely the theme that LaShawn reinforced today. In sociological terms, such a minority obligations approach is doomed because it asks oppressed individuals to undo system-level discrimination at the personal level. Both majority and minority groups must work together and at the institutional level. Okay? So if prejudice is thinking, right, things that you should not think, and discrimination is the people in the great and spacious building, racism is the great and spacious building, okay, for those of you who need help. Okay, it is not the same thing to say racism is only prejudice. It is far more than that. It is a system, okay? Echoing the diverse gatherings of LDS members at the B1 and Black LDS Legacy commemorations, and I had so much fun just walking around the conference center over and over and over. I've been waiting 40 years for this to happen. There are now over 5,000 students of color at BYU. BYU is at once two things: a historically white college and university, white LDS space, arguably the epitome of the white LDS space, at the same time as an increasingly diverse and selective institution with thousands of students of color whom we no longer erase. There are over 420 black students at BYU, 3 times as many as during my time as a student in the late 90s. As noted here, Latino enrollment stands at over 2,000 students. These figures are expected to rise substantially this coming year because this was the most diverse admitted class in BYU history by far. One of those 424 black BYU students is, I think, in MTC right now on the mission, so she can stay humble. She won't know about this. Is Rachel Weaver. Rachel is from the same ward as Jabari Parker and me, and attended the same high school, Whitney Young, as Michelle Obama. Whitney Young stands out for its academic excellence and its racial integration, incredibly rare in Chicago's highly segregated schools. By comparison, Jabari Parker's school was effectively 99% black, and my school was 85% black. Rachel is middle class, not the first in her family to attend college, yet she and her brother Ronald are the first to attend BYU. When Rachel speaks truth to her fellow classmates about the pain of rejection in the non-LDS black community and racism among the LDS white community, you can hear a pin drop. And black students like Rachel comments and quiet writings let you know it registered deeply with every student. Black students like Rachel exemplify a vision of BYU as a selective institution where racial integration is not a roadblock to excellence in education, but the road to excellence itself. Rachel is on her way to the mission field in Alabama, undeniably third-generation black LDS. She'll have these markers such as return missionary, and she's unquestionably third-generation black American middle class. Historically, BYU's applicant pool has been very homogeneous, and that is directly from the Director of Admissions with data, not just racially, but also socioeconomically, leaving out first-generation students, for example. Many black pioneer students braved tremendous racial isolation that Tacove Jackson Van detailed earlier, and understandably, many of them urged other black members of the church not to apply and thus avoid this unfair burden. So the virtuous cycle depicted here was instead a vicious one, a challenge other selective universities have not fully overcome, but are further along in addressing. With students like Rachel enriching the applicant pool and an improved admissions process in place, the reversal of the cycle has just begun. Students like Rachel and so many others do not merely diversify the pool, they enrich it. Next in the cycle are community building and paradigm shifting. Community provides a source of identity and support, and comes in many forms. What is new to the cycle is a substantial investment in anti-racist curriculum that makes for an intellectual and spiritual experience that transforms students and institutions. In short, if we ask students of color to come to BYU, there must be something to come to. to acknowledge their worth, and to combat racism. They cannot merely survive on the life support of community and clubs and activities. We must ensure that they thrive everywhere. BYU must leverage its unique mission to offer an anti-racist experience that transforms all students alike into agents of change. Then, alumni will not only urge underrepresented students to apply, but also mentor them. Alumni who choose graduate study will know there is something for them to come back to and build if they choose to apply to BYU as faculty and professionals. As a member of the sociology faculty since 2012, I will now focus the rest of my remarks on the two blue rectangles at the bottom of the cycle. And this is not an exhaustive inventory. This reflects the limitations of Jake Rugh. In terms of community, I highlight the black alumni who started the BYU, and it's a lot of slides, not just this one. I highlight the black alumni who started the BYU Black Alumni Association and the black and Latina students in founding the Women of Color Club. Africana Studies serves as the sponsor for BYU's Black Alumni Association and clearinghouse for all race-related events. The number of black faculty and professionals has tripled. Minority representation on the Student Advisory Council of Student Leaders has risen from 9% to 36%. The Multicultural Forum Support Group is facilitated by two PhD-trained clinical psychologists of color, Luis Wheeler and Hoku Conklin. Another highlight was a training led by 5 formerly undocumented students with DACA or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival status, which the LDS Church and BYU have officially endorsed and strongly support. BYU and the BYU Kennedy Center, which, no coincidence, is now led by a sociologist who mentored me, have hosted influential black leaders and scholars. Another favorite of mine that my children got to meet and get her autograph was Ruby Bridges. Bonnie St. John dismissed the folly of colorblindness with crisp moral clarity and exactness. And you won't find that in the transcript. That was in the question and answer. Nathan Connolly gave the most enlightening lecture on segregation I have ever heard, which is saying a lot because that's my area of expertise. Recent changes foster anti-racist intellectual development and spiritual development in the BYU curriculum. Roughly 3,000 students in American Heritage, or 10% of the BYU student body, read The Case for Reparations by Ta-Nehisi Coates in a single semester, and I was able to report that back directly to Ta-Nehisi Coates himself, and he was, of course, very pleased to hear that. The Race and the Priesthood Official Gospel Topics essay has been hard-coded into the syllabi across courses in religion and social sciences, and there are some potential pitfalls that I'm happy to talk about in the Q&A. One exciting change that's very important and difficult to overstate is the overhaul of BYU's general education requirements, a process informed by best practices at other institutions and a more racially inclusive era. To finish, I will focus on 2 case studies of community, identity, and anti-racist paradigm shifting curriculum, the Civil Rights Seminar and the Sociology of Race and Ethnicity course. I start by offering this powerful symbol of Dr. King's famed barber, Nelson Malden, greeting students and faculty in a BYU t-shirt. The Civil Rights Seminar is a semester-long immersion experience led by a racially diverse set of faculty. The culmination is a trip to sacred civil rights sites. And just think about that if the church members had the same enthusiasm to go out and brave the mosquitoes like they do in my native Illinois, to go down south and see the sacred civil rights sites the way they see the church sites. In Atlanta, Anniston, Birmingham, Tuskegee, Montgomery, and Selma. Over the years, it has grown into a selective seminar under the leadership of Dean Ben Ogles and coordinator Anthony Bates, and excellent historians. Students are evaluated differently based on introspection and transformation, not memorization and recall. There is no test, because living the legacy of the movement is the greatest test of all. The Civil Rights Seminar imparts a unifying experience for students of color who are black, white, and neither black nor white, who will not be erased as a form of racism, and they will be seen as well. Students of color come to BYU from many different backgrounds, and the seminar empowers them to be agents of change. As historian Nell Irvin Painter notes when she was talking about Rachel Dolezal and Dylan Roof, white identity is mistakenly assumed to be a blank slate or a racist bigot. For white students, the interfaith and interracial civil rights movement gives them a new white identity that compels interracial solidarity. By 2019, over 100 experienced alumni of the BYU Civil Rights Seminar will be agents of change, recruiting and mentoring students, shifting the racial paradigm, and dismantling racism. And students that are here today, Melody Jackson called it the beloved community, and we were asked if we would get on the bus, and Janisha did not hesitate and said she would ride that bus until the wheels fell off. That was a very memorable moment for me, a strengthening one for me. A final seminar lesson: until we recenter the American narrative on the Black experience and root our identity in the sacred sacrifices made by those of many races to live our highest principles, none of us is truly, fully American. That should remind you of the sacrifice of Black LDS pioneers. Regarding the LDS racial frame, and I wish we had time to watch this, but we'll do that later. Consider the three literal and talented generations of the Bonner family. We are struck by three things. First, evoking temple marriage and racial equality is of far higher value than a white-centered style of song or necktie attire. Second, it reminds us that the 1978 revelation was all about ending discrimination against Black families so all of us, too, could be together forever. Most intriguingly, the generations here prove that multiracial inclusion does not always mean fading into whiteness, but can move us towards the brilliance of Blackness. As my colleague Ignacio Garcia suggests, like the integrated group of American BYU students at the Bridge to Selma on the slide just before, a deeper sense of multiracial collective identity enlarges the capacity to realize the divine potential of a truly multiracial Zion. And it will be multiracial, and some people are not ready for that. To wrap up, Soc 323 and data based on 441 students. As it says in the New York City Hall, in God we trust, everything else bring data, okay? This course can fulfill BYU's GE global and cultural awareness requirement, and 1/3 of the students are not sociology majors, because I know there's a concern in the social scientists in the audience about self-selection here. Enrollment in sociology has increased dramatically over the past decade, rising to 414 majors and 99 minors. Sociology is likely the most diverse department on campus and is known to be welcoming to students like Janisha, as well as LGBTQ, DACA, immigrant, and first-generation students. My colleague Ryan Gabriel and I teach the Sociology of Race course, and we are very excited to continue to hire excellent faculty to expand and magnify its impact. Our syllabi are overlapping and distinct, drawing on our unique backgrounds and training, yet each is rigorous and prepares students as though they were all going to the top graduate programs in race in the country. We are united in guiding students in their discovery that the racial truth shall make them free. Today I will share with you data from only 2 of 8 indicators, because I know Kay is keeping time, on the impact of our course on student knowledge, attitudes, and behavior. In this first item, students were asked before class began how much they knew about the contributions people of color have made to American society, which was one of the items with a particularly low starting point, particularly for white students. The most likely, but obviously not the only ones, to have a whitewashed K-12 education experience. The impact of our course on this indicator is immediately apparent in the data, with the largest increases among white students and the highest levels among Black students. From Tulsa's Black Wall Street, to Ronald Takaki, to W. Du Bois, the Chicano rights movement led by Dolores Huerta, to example after I could go through hundreds of examples, students gain a more complete and correct knowledge of American society. Why anti-racism our aim? Historically, many good people supported slavery and Jim Crow and a priesthood restriction. Similarly, most colorblind whites who believe that blacks' problems are mostly their own doing and do not see anything wrong with their own white lifestyle are good people too. For readers in this situation, good people may subscribe to many of the frames of colorblindness. I urge a personal and political movement away from claiming to be non-racist to becoming anti-racist. My interpretation, my own opinion, if colorblindness seeks to erase race because racism has already or is assumed to then disappear, anti-racism seeks not to erase race, but to erase racism. Students in our course must complete an action-based project, and one diverse group of students planned a panel featuring my colleague Cameron McCoy and myself. We talked Black Panther, Coco, Colin Kaepernick, Army veteran Nate Boyer, and the role of racial integration in the Parkland student-led Never Again movement. It was BSU's club night activity. Over 100 people came, and it was a highlight of my teaching career. Later, a white student who planned the activity and got the courage to invite her mother said that her mother came away completely changed forever by this event. Further, consider what this biracial Black and Hawaiian student attests. It seemed as though others believed that if they did not talk about race, were colorblind, then the effects of race would not be there. At first, I looked at this as something negative, as something restricting, that did not allow me to be who I am. But I soon realized that by having so many friends who are white Americans, it allows for the opportunity to help educate them and myself. I would have to say that the class gave me a sense of empowerment. Students of all racial backgrounds converged to near universal agreement that they would not merely endorse anti-racism, but that they are likely to explain why it is important to be anti-racist. Like trained musicians, students retain their unique strengths, their unique instruments, but they are in greater harmony on the same racial page. I only got a couple more. All right. There are countless ways to implement anti-racism. These are just a few examples we systematically study and require students to apply in action as part of racially diverse teams. And in doing so, they seed a growing future of multiracial coalitions. Personally, as part of a team of experts myself on many legal settlements, I have helped Black American homeowners receive reparations in 2 different court cases, one of which we study in our class. The approach to truth and reconciliation, exemplified by Brian Stevenson's recently realized vision of a national memorial to peace and justice, is something we spend an entire class period understanding, and something all of BYU will be learning more about this fall, so stay tuned. The books we read recenter our analysis of Asian Americans, Mexican Americans, and Arab Americans, all on the Black American experience, and thus help us shift our racial premise as well as our dominant racial paradigm. My very final note is based on the wisdom of historian Ibram Kendi. Only racists say they are not racist. Only the racist lives by the heartbeat of denial. The anti-racist lives by the opposite heartbeat, one that rarely and irregularly sounds in America, the heartbeat of confession. And the only other mention of racism I could find in General Conference records prior to recent years from Neil Maxwell, no surprise it was him, in 1995. God's second commandment, love thy neighbor, clearly leaves no room for racism, yet is not enough to be free of racism, right? And right here we got the common white understanding of racism as prejudice, right? An individual level thing. As we come closer to the Lord, He has promised to show us our weakness. Hence, general goodness is no excuse for failing to work on those things which we lack. Think about the we here. Is that a whole bunch of individuals? No. It's the system, right? The system lacks that change. The Black LDS pioneers, those most free of racism, truthfully confess that we are not past race or racism, thereby showing the collective work to do, to heal ourselves in community, to shift paradigms, to change institutions, and to bring about racial justice. In summary, I have argued that we need to reframe the Black LDS experience using the minority culture mobility theory and paradigm. We need to learn from the LDS Black success frame, because that literally is the success frame for Zion that we should all emulate. We need to restate and revision a selective institution like BYU. I picked that because I work there and I'm trying to participate in that transformation. We could pick any other selective white space in our society and analyze that too. We have this vision, we have the case studies, we have the evidence. I've taught now 500 students in this data and 1,500 students, and you can imagine the impact that ripples from each one of them. If we recenter on the Black LDS experience, we can shift the paradigm away from bad doctrine and prepare for a multiracial future. Thank you.
Listen, let me let y'all in on a little cultural secret right now. After black folks eat, we get what's called the itis. Black folks laughing because they know what it is. That's what we have right now, okay? We just ate lunch, and we all up here struggling, so I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible so that y'all can start asking questions so y'all can stay awake, okay? A little bit about my experience in the church. I was let me start from the beginning. I was introduced to the gospel by a young man on an airplane coming from San Diego back to Dallas. And this entire 2.5-hour flight, we talked about God and religion, and we had a really great conversation. Anyway, we did the whole coming or going talk, and I said, I'm just down here visiting a friend from, elementary school. I was 20 at the time. And he was stationed there, so I went to go visit him. And he said, I actually was out here at what's called a mission farewell. One of my good friends is going to serve a mission for my church. And I was Baptist at the time, and I said, that is so cool. I've always wanted to do them little week mission trips, you know what I'm talking about? Go out there, baptize a few folks, come on back, live my life of privilege. And so he was like, no, yeah, actually, we do it for like 2 years. We do it for 2 years. And I was like, okay. And so he said, the women do it for 1.5 years, and the men do it for 2 years. And he said, you know what, if you join my church, you can serve a mission. And I said, shut up. So anyway, we exchanged information. And the next week, I was actually meeting with the missionaries, and I was baptized by him, my friend Daniel Nasseth. We're still really good friends to this day. Served our missions at the same time. So it took me about 2 months. Immediately after I was baptized, my ex, he was even an ex at the time, contacted me, and he was like, let me tell you about this Mormon church. They racist. I'm like, why do you care? You're white. Why do you care? Anyway, so I was like mad weird. So anyway, he brings me like this binder, y'all, of like anti-Mormon stuff. So I'm like, wow, this is crazy. So then he tells me about blacks in the priesthood. So I never heard that. I didn't hear about it before I joined the church, which I feel like a lot of people usually hear it before they join the church, and they still join, but I didn't hear about it. So I call my missionaries, whom I loved and just adored, and so I call them and I say, hey, my ex came by, he dropped off this binder, he said, blacks couldn't hold the priesthood, like what's going on? And so obviously these white missionaries, right, they're in a panic. They're like, just sit tight, we'll be there tomorrow, okay, just calm down. I was like, I'm not really not calm right now, so sure. Anyway, they came by the next day, and we had another lesson. And it was really interesting because I got all the same excuses that people gave. It was like, we don't really know. You know what? Like, we heard that the members were too racist for blacks to hold the priesthood. And so, as we know and understand, God would really love, like my friend Zandra says, a mega church of racists as opposed to a really small church of faithful members. And so that was kind of the excuse that everyone keeps giving. Like, we just don't know. Like, God just, whatever. And so I really kind of shelved it for like a while. I didn't think about it. It wasn't like an in-my-face issue, right? So then I went on a mission, and I started my mission in Baltimore, Maryland. And what was interesting is that because of the DC temple, a lot of black people are really familiar with Mormons, Mormon doctrine. They remember going through the open house of the DC temple. And so they have those experiences. And so when I knock into them, they remembered a lot of really racist things that I went out on my mission after a year of being a member. So I knew that there was a priesthood ban. However, I had never, ever heard all the things that past prophets and apostles had said. So when people on my mission were saying these things, I was like, they crazy out here saying our prophets telling us racist stuff. But then, like, I came home and realized I got this flood, like this influx of information that the things that all these people were telling me on my mission that I thought they were crazy was actually true. And so that started this kind of struggle. I got back from my mission in 2011. The essay came out 2013, and that clarified a lot of things, but then it put me in this really weird spot because it's not that I believe that the ban was of God, but I don't even know how to word this in a way that makes it logical, but I had somewhat of a peace about it. And then when the essay came out and we realized like it definitely wasn't of God, there's no revelation behind it. We don't know. why the ban was in place, then it was like this incredible paradigm shift for me. And so
Paradigm.
yeah, so and this crazy paradigm shift for me because and I was really grateful that I was grounded in doctrine and in Christ, because had it been in man or in the prophets and me thinking, well, the prophets, as Latter-day Saints often do, we kind of like deify, is that a word? Deify? Makes them into deity. Yeah, I only be using big words. I'm an English teacher though.
You got it.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, they often do that to these men and make it seem like they just can't make mistakes, which is kind of what Paul Reeves was talking about. They'll never lead us astray. We can't, such and such just can't possibly happen. And so it really shifted everything I believed. But on my mission, because I had the opportunity to study doctrine so much, I was able to combat that when I found out and when I read the essay. And so it really grounded me. Today and every day, I'm really struggling reconciling with coming to church every Sunday, being around racist people that don't know they're racist because no one wants to be called a racist and no one truly knows what racism is. Because for members of the church, they are not calling people the N-word, and that means they're not racist. And so we have to really get to what overt racism is and what covert racism is and what institutionalized and systematic racism is, because they're just not getting it, and they continue to perpetuate it because they're not understanding it. And so anyway, I said I was gonna make this short. Let me wrap this up. I struggle every Sunday in church. I go every Sunday. Some Sundays I just throw in the towel. I'm like, you know what, not today, Jesus. But I try. I be trying real hard. I'm in there about three out of 4 Sundays. So of the month. So I just really want us to be able to tackle these issues head on and be able to acknowledge. And I've said this before, but I need to just kind of close my statements in saying this. I sat in a Sunday school lesson a few months back, and we should have all had the lesson, if you remember, and it was all over the priesthood, and the teacher, the Sunday school teacher, put the entire timeline of when the priesthood was restored and when this happened and that happened and all these different things on the board, yet when the priesthood ban was in place was not up there, and when the priesthood ban was lifted was not up there. And I'm sitting here thinking, how did we erase one of the most critical, intensely important moments involving the priesthood from a priesthood lesson? So when we talk about racism is erasure. And we need to get to the root of that as well, because sometimes we think, well, if we just don't talk about it, it'll go away. For those of you who are married, we know that doesn't work, right? It's not how that works. So anyway, that's what I want to say, is that we have to get past the erasure. We have to start hitting things heads on and being able to discuss it in a way that it doesn't matter if you're uncomfortable, because that's where growth happens.
You sure, Phylicia, you have 7 more minutes?
So what I was saying was, I actually really wanted to make mine brief so that we really could get into a lot more panel questions. So y'all know I could talk for days, so don't play. Y'all just gonna ask me the little questions.
No, I'm teasing her, because when she came up, she told me, she was like, I'm not going to do a whole 15. I'm telling you right now. So. Okay, so we'll go to Dr. Robert Foster.
You can take my minutes. They roll over them like AT&T.
Like AT&T.
I got you.
This is kind of odd. I don't like the public life, and it keeps coming back to me, and I really don't enjoy this at all.
Here we are.
I'm not joking. I've had opportunities to serve in different capacities, and I don't like them. I would rather be come to church, do my thing, go home, and that's it. I am innately racist. I'm just going to say that first today. I am, and I am that way because I was born in the United States. I was born in Jersey, a little town called Camden, which is the myrtle capital of the United States. and my mother was in the Nation of Islam, and she decided that after getting pistol whipped, that it was time for her to get her children out of Camden. And so she couldn't leave herself, and so she deported myself to live with my great aunt and uncle. And so my uncle was a Baptist deacon, and he brought me up in the Baptist ways. And some of the things in the Black Baptist Church, when you're around an area which is 95% African American, and the only whites that I had in my elementary school was April and Jason, you realize that you see social constructs. April and Jason were very well off, and they went to our school only because it was a tradition of their family, right? They had been there forever. Their family had actually started that as a school, and they were there. Interesting time living in the South. I grew up in a little small town called Warrenton. And I was taught not to necessarily trust white people. I was taught that by my uncle, because he didn't trust them at all. He had left the South in the 40s and had moved to Richmond and had some troubles there. And then he moved up to Jersey. And as he lived there in Jersey, he also had a lot of troubles there, also a lot with white folks. And so he taught me that I shouldn't trust them. And it was interesting growing up there in the good old South, in good old Warrenton. But my uncle was a righteous man. He was righteous in the sense that he cared and he loved. He was a deacon in his church, and he ministered. He taught me what ministering was before the church changed their program from home teaching to ministering. He taught me how to go out and minister to the one on a consistent basis. I recall being a young man about 8, and he would take me out to go visit people who didn't have food. And every week he would be out there ministering and serving, and I loved that with him because it was something that we shared. Now, I hated being on that farm that he had. Now, he was a retired man from Jersey and moved back to Carolina because our family had a history of being there in that area. We had inherited that land from sharecropping, and so we had that land there, and he moved back to it, and he built up a small farm because he was retired, and he thought it was his work and glory to make me work that farm as hard as I could. This is why I'm an eye doctor now. But growing up there in Warrenton, I loved it. I really did. It was a predominantly black community. I was introduced to the church by my mother, actually. Because my mother was not raising me, she was living in Jersey still, and she ended up finding the church when I was about 8. I used to visit there in Camden about every summer, and I would visit there just to see the family there and try to dodge bullets, I guess. It was a crazy place. Camden was wild. And I would go up there and visit, and one summer she just said, "I'm going to try to get you baptized." I didn't know what that meant. And so she had the missionaries over, these young men, and they taught me. And I had a very special experience with those missionaries. Actually, before those missionaries came, which I will not share, but that experience told me that I needed to join this church. I was baptized. I left there and went down to Warrenton, as I always did, and went to a school. The closest church was the Henderson branch, which was about 40 miles away, and so I never went, and my Baptist deacon uncle wasn't going to take me to any Mormon church, especially with all those white folks. Shortly thereafter, my mother became less active, and so she didn't go to church any longer. And so, therefore, the church was never a part of my life again. I grew up singing Baptist songs, having a Baptist hymnal. It's the same Baptist hymnal that we used at BYU in 2002 when we actually started a little Baptist choir there. But And so I didn't have any connection with the church at all until my great aunt, who was raising me, passed away. When she passed away, my mother, who was married in Jersey, decided that I'm not sure how much of the story I should tell. So when my great aunt passed away, my mother was very hurt, and her now ex-husband, it's a weird story between them, and I could go on and on about that relationship, but he wasn't mourning with her the same way. He wanted something different. So that night, she pretty much took a baseball bat to him, and she decided to leave. And so she put all her stuff in a grocery bag, and or trash bags actually, and she packed up her car, and she left Jersey, and she moved into the house where I lived in Warrenton. Warrenton was a very small place, if you can imagine. Well, actually, if you look at history, it was the richest county in North Carolina until slavery ended. Then it became the poorest. You wonder why, right? 95% blacks. All the slave owners don't have their workforce any longer, so it became very poor. Anyway, so there was not a lot of work there in Warrenton, and so my mother would travel down to Raleigh to try to find work. It's about an hour drive. And traveling down to Raleigh, she passed by the LDS Church there, and the Spirit told her, you need to go back to church. And so she did. She went to the Henderson branch. But shortly thereafter, my mom and my uncle, who were living under the same roof, if you can imagine, had a difficult time together. And so she moved to Raleigh. After moving to Raleigh, she made me, I think I was 13. She said, what do you want to do? And for me, this is one of the fundamental changes of my life, where this change, I think, put me on a projection to where I am now. I decided to move with her to Raleigh. I don't know why. I think the Spirit said I needed to. Yes, it was my mom, right? But I didn't know her at all. She didn't raise me. I didn't understand the dilemma she had went through in knowing how to get her children out of this environment. I didn't quite understand that as a 13-year-old boy. All that I understood is that my mother left me with these people to raise me. That's all that I could understand. And it didn't happen just at 5 years old. It happened multiple times. It happened when I was 18 months. It happened when I was 4. It happened again when I was 5, when I was there in the house with her, and she had overdosed, and I was trying to help her. It was things that happened that, for me at 13, this was a leap of faith. But I knew that it was right. And so when I moved to Raleigh, she started to go back to a church, and I started to go back with her. And I knew that I was baptized, but they said that I wasn't baptized because there was no record of me being baptized. Therefore, I was retaught the gospel by these sisters, and I was baptized at 14 again. So officially, I was baptized in 1994, April 9th, 1991, excuse me. And so I start that off with just saying that, I've had an interesting background. Where I've come from that point, I would say it's just been amazing. It's opportunities. That's all for myself. It is. It's just opportunities. I've talked with individuals about like affirmative action and things. Man, I could have been. I could have murdered someone's family member in this room, honestly, as a boy. But the church changed me. It changed me completely. And the gospel can change anyone if we let it change us. My uncle, my mother's brother, recently, as of the past couple weeks, stabbed his girlfriend multiple times and tried to kill her. Multiple times. This is very, very recent. Right? He's 68 years old, Uncle Albert is, right? So the gospel never, he never joined the church. He grew up in Camden. He went through that same lifestyle, which was craziness, and he's never changed. The gospel, luckily, changed my life to where I am now. Fast forward, I attended Rick's College, and when I was there, that was my first opportunity to be in an area with all white people. And it was crazy. It was crazy because I didn't realize how many people who looked like me struggled with being in an all-white area. I was so okay in my blackness that it didn't bother me as much because my uncle had raised me in a certain way that I was proud to be black. And not that people were not proud to be black, but they weren't sure about how they felt about things. And so there was a man there by the name of Moses Diaz. He said, Rob, you need to get involved. And I was like, look, man, I'm playing basketball here. Yes, Covey, I did go to Rick's College to play basketball. I didn't know how to get involved. He invited me to get involved in the BSU, in the Black Student Union. And I did from that point on. Then I left and went and served a mission. I served the mission, what I call the Great California Arcadia Mission. And there's a couple experiences that I'd like to share with you tonight. The first one was me and my companion from Idaho. We were just planning, and a lady in a Jeep pulled up, a white lady, and she was yelling, just telling us how racist the church was. And from what I understood later, she was a member who had dated a black man and had felt the racism from dating a black man in the LDS Church. And so she struggled with that, and so she wanted to let me know about her struggle, which was probably good, but at that moment, it made me also struggle. The next thing, about 2 or 3 weeks later, I tell you, when you go on a mission, the Lord tests you right away.
Baby.
The next couple weeks, me and my companion, my comp was, he's from Idaho, and he was trunky because he was getting married, as all of the young men, right? They were getting married right after they got home. And he was waiting for a letter from his, hopefully, fiance, right? So we ride our bikes back to our place of living, and we check the mail. There's nothing there, and we go back to our appointment. Well, as we're riding back for our appointment, a cop comes by and pulls us over, and then a second, and then a third, and then a fourth. And the first thing that comes to mind for me as a black man is Rodney King. This is 1996. And I'm thinking of Rodney King because that was very recent in my memory as a young black man. And so I'm very, very nervous. And so they push me down on the ground. They draw his pistol. They yell and scream, "What are you guys doing?" They, just doing the typical thing there. While my companion is a white man, he's standing. He's trying to say, "Look, we're LDS missionaries. We're from the Mormon church." Now, granted, I am on a bike, dressed in a white shirt and tie, and I'm pulled over by the cops for pretending to be a black Mormon missionary. They eventually realize that we are who we say we are, and they pull us up and say, well, there was someone that had reported that there was 2 people dressed up as Mormon missionaries stealing mail. Right? This is in 1996. Does this happen kind of today still?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it does, doesn't it? Right? So, but this was as a black missionary. You think that it would be the place I would. I was not in the hood or anything. I was dressed appropriately for what I thought. Right? But that happened. Another experience I'd like to share with you here was when I was elected student body president at BYU. It was a struggle getting to that point. I actually won in a landslide. My time's out, right?
Yeah, keep going.
Did you add my minutes on the heels?
Mm-hmm. I'm adding.
Okay, so you just extra.
I'm just extra? Okay.
You're just extra.
All right, that works. And as I was doing it, I found out that I had won early. And there was so much hatred that was spewed throughout the campaign. I asked my wife, I called her up on our then little cube phone. I said, should I do this? Should I risk this for our family? And she told me yes. I was this close to just saying, the heck with it. But she said do it. It would help BYU. And I said, all right. And so I did it. And from that point on, it was crazy. I got letters from the KKK. I got my tires slashed on BYU campus.
It's probably just the eldest quorum president.
Probably the eldest quorum president. Right? So there were challenges there that were met. So much so that I left Provo and moved to Orem. And people didn't know why, but I left Provo and moved to Orem because there was just a lot of junk that was happening to our family, and that we didn't want that involvement anymore. But BYU was very interesting. It was a wonderful place. We have our oldest adopted daughter there now. She's playing basketball, and she'll love it, right? But it was a challenge for us being there as the student body president. Lots of different things happened. So a lot of things I wanted to share, which I didn't mention. I should say, after I was arrested by, or not like arrested, but after I was pulled over by the LAPD, I felt like I was arrested. My mission president heard about everything, and he called me up and he apologized. And then he also said that he's going to put me in touch with someone that could help. And so from that moment on, from that month on, I started to receive letters from a person named Darius Gray and the Genesis group. And so the Genesis group from that moment on started to write me every month in my mission. And I was able to kind of get some solace to understand, there are people out there that are getting the same type of experiences. I'm not alone in this. And so when I left the mission field, it was my goal to get myself to Genesis every month. And so I was attending Rick's College, and I would drive 4 hours down to Midville every month to be a part of the Genesis group. After that, I transferred down to BYU Provo. It was the same thing. Get everyone that we possibly can, and we're going to all go to Genesis. This was the way it was, because I knew how much that their letters helped me. I needed to make sure everyone else was actually helped with that. So the reason why those Genesis groups are should be available to everyone is so that they can get an understanding that, no, you are not alone. I'm going to fast forward that comment to my daughter's comment. My daughter now is 15, bright kid, straight A student right now, wonderful at basketball, although I don't tell her that. She feels alone all the time because she's a black woman, and we live in a black neighborhood. But she goes to church with almost all white folks. And so she feels alone at church because she's the only black kid there. And then she goes to school, and she's trying to live these values that we teach her, and she feels alone there because no one else are living these values, right? So the only solace that she has is when she's in our home. And the other solace she has is when she's playing basketball, right? Because I'm her coach, right? And we try to do things in our group that are LDS oriented. Although everyone in our group is non-LDS, which is why I like living outside of Utah. The majority of our kids in my group, I probably shouldn't share this, almost all of them are black. Almost all of them are straight A students. All of their parents are middle-class people.
Because that's the rule, not the exception.
Yes,
because that's the rule.
What we said? Yep, that's the black.
Exactly right.
Middle-class minority.
The only person, you have one white kid on our team, Anna. Great kid, academically challenged. Parents are going through all types of hell, right? But it's just amazing how it differs, how we have these constructs in our head, but realistically, when we look at our communities, they are not what we think they are. It is the rule that majority of black people are in middle class. And it's wonderful. And it's challenging. I am grateful to be a part of that. One thing I'd like to share quickly before I end, I know my time is up, is Numbers chapter 11. Who knows that? Anybody know what's happening in Numbers chapter 11? Anybody?
This is the stake presidency in you.
Sorry, this is the stake presidency in me. I'm the second counselor, stake president. Anybody know what Numbers 11 is? Come on, people.
You mean after we look it up right now on our phones?
Numbers 11. Anybody know? This is when the children of Israel, right? Moses is leading them, and the children of Israel are asking for meat.
I was just about to say that.
Because they have manna, they have manna, and they have manna, and they have manna, and it's not given to them, it's given to them from God, but they have manna, and they're tired of manna. And they want some meat. And Moses says, I'm done with these people. I'm so sick and tired of their complaining and their whining. That's how I feel about church sometimes. I get really sick and tired of their complaining and whining. And the Lord does too. Because he says in those verses, he says, well, I will give them meat until it comes out of their nose. So if we want to be biased, we want to be racist, the Lord will fix us by letting it come out of our nose. But I pray that we will change and we'll become like our Savior. I'm grateful for this opportunity, so thank you.
So I was first introduced to the church in 1997, and when the missionaries came to knocked on my door, I would say my reference for generally everything is movies and TV. I love just like pop culture stuff. And I had seen a clip of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Y'all know the one where what's the Morgan Freeman is in it. So Morgan Freeman was a Moor, but in my mind, I thought Morgan Freeman was a Mormon. So when the missionaries came to my door, I was like, oh, we got some black people in this church because Morgan Freeman played a Mormon in the movie. So Morgan Freeman had did it so. So I can't, yes, he was a Mormon. Get with it, Brother Birch. So I went to church in my freshman year of college. I studied with the missionaries. I decided I was going to be baptized. They said, let us, we're going to have you come to church first to see how it is. So I went to church. I was a little bit surprised that Morgan Freeman, whoever wasn't there. But I was pretty militant in high school in 1997, 1996. And I didn't stand for the pledge. I didn't stand for the pledge then. And there were a group of white kids that also didn't stand for the pledge. And we still had to take heat from, teachers, and once the principal called us out and wanted to talk to us, but my mom was very militant, so she didn't care. So anyway, when I went to church this first time, one of the kids at church was one of the girls who didn't stand for the pledge. I was like, oh, I didn't have the language for, young kids say woke now, but I was like, oh, they woke, they know. They got the girl that didn't stand for the pledge, plus Morgan Freeman. This is cool. Yeah, so not until probably a year in did I even know about the priesthood ban at all. And so that took a lot of adjusting, soul searching. I think it's a very personal thing every black member has to come to for themselves. Luckily, I was baptized into a singles ward. People were super friendly, very nice. I felt a little bit like Denzel's, where's Professor Smith? Dixon, not Denzel, but, America's racist, so nothing is surprising to me, right? I grew up in the South. And my family is very much not about respectability politics. It doesn't matter if you have on a suit and tie, you're going to encounter racism everywhere, is how I was raised. But in that same vein, I was not raised as white people look and stand up straight, white people look and act like this, white people look and talk like this. My family's not like that at all. So my mom was very much, raised us all very much of just do you, be yourself, if people don't like it, too bad type of thing. So I had a really good experience in the singles ward. At a singles activity, I met another black girl Mormon, name drop. Since Dr. Rugh wants to drop Ta-Nehisi Coates, I want to drop Kim Bae Sullivan. You guys might have seen her in the Mormon movie. That's my girlfriend. That's my homegirl. So when I started at the singles ward, I met her. She was going to her home ward, but she's coming to single ward stuff, and I was like, hey, girl, you see another black girl, very excited. And for some reason, that ward, we just started to attract young black women. There were 4 or 5 or 6 of us, and it was a really good sisterhood to be able to enjoy. Fast forward to, I met some white dude. He was like the first white dude I ever dated, y'all. and he fell in love with me, and I ended up moving out to Utah. He told me before I moved out to Utah, because he served his mission in Georgia, and he was very familiar with the culture, that it was very white here, and I was not prepared, because I had seen places that were white, but I had not really seen places that were very white with no black people. So I was very shocked by the lack of just diversity here, and had a really hard time here. I did not have a Genesis moment here. I did not find black people here. It was 2.5 years of really rough, of like, anytime I would just see a black person on the street, I would be like, stop the car, let me out, and like, my name is Kay, what are you doing? Do you want to get my phone number? Can we talk? Just like harassing random black people on a regular, y'all. I'm not proud of it. But anyway, so when I first moved to Utah, I just thought, well, these white people just have never seen black people. They just don't know black people. I mean, every time I go anywhere, they would just stare at me all the time. Of course, they would follow me around in stores. Of course, they would ask me, where are you from? You know, all the usual stuff. And my fiance would then say, he knew it wasn't true, but he was like, they're looking at you because you're beautiful, and they just, yeah. So it was interesting, because it was my first taste of living in, I feel like Utah I lived in, because I went to the University of Utah. Salt Lake was very, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word when everybody's together and they're covered and it's like sheltered, or, you know, ingrown, whatever. So I had a roommate, and the thing was, like, these roommates, they were really big about getting married, was like huge to them, and I didn't grow up with that, like, you know, getting married, being a huge deal. But I was dating this really cute white dude that they all, you know, was like, how did she get that dude? Which really, how did that dude get me? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, he is cute, y'all. He is cute and smart and stuff. But anyway, I had a roommate, and she worked at the church office building as a secretary. One day, she brought home a file. I'm sorry, you guys. Everybody else so distinguished, but it brings up a lot of emotion for me. And I'm also going to reference Drake in this passage, so I want you guys to stay with me.
I'm here.
But she brought home a file of all of these crazy things that someone in church leadership has said about black people. You know, like you said, they're the cursed seed, they're fence sitters, all of this different stuff. And I was like, well, I don't know why you brought this to me, because I have a patriarchal blessing, and I know I wasn't a fence sitter. I know I was valiant. And I realize now, she was real mad, because I had bagged a boy that she wanted. And the boy had came to me with a ring, and we was getting married. And girls in my ward was saying stuff like, she only been here for 6 months. How's she getting married? We've been here for 2 years, and we're not married. That's a whole different story, right? The paradigm of Mormon women and this idea of marriage. But I realize now she was mad. I referenced the Drake song on Scorpion. You big mad.
Big man, huh?
You mad, huh? But what he said in that song, I can't do anything for you. I got to keep it moving. So that was the highlight, low light of my time in Utah. Once I graduated, honestly, y'all, I was ready to go. I told my husband, you got 1 semester. He did 24 credit hours in 1 semester. I said, we are out, Pune, yeah. I come back now and I see more black people in a 3-day span than I saw in 2.5 years.
Yep. Wow. Yep.
So hats off to
the survivors.
The survivors. Yeah. That's right. You're right. Because when he said when Dr. Smith said it takes, you know, all of these things to persist, it does, and especially here. So I just want to give love to y'all that are here. After that, we moved to South Carolina. South Carolina is the South. It's very interesting. It's very welcoming there. We had a Relief Society activity once, and the president said, we're going to get everybody's baby pictures, and we're going to put them on the bulletin board, and then we're going to guess who's who. I said, everybody gonna know it's me. Oh, Sister Montgomery, you're so much more than a black person. I was like, but I am a black person, and all y'all white, and you are gonna know it's me. So that microaggression of invalidation, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I moved to Philadelphia after South Carolina. We lived there for about 7 or 8 years. Philadelphia is, the branch that we were in, strongly 50% black.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge change. It was so comfortable to be in a place where Mormon culture is sloughed away because there are so many new members that everything is boiled down. There's no, all the things that you think are Mormon that really ain't Mormon, that's just Mormon culture, is pretty much gone.
And Kay, let me say, that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
Yep, 50% black, 50% white. Yeah.
So that was awesome. I mean, it was difficult because you have challenges when you have a bunch of just people that are new, right? Staffing, doing all kind of stuff. My own bell was ringing. So Philadelphia was wonderful. Once we moved from Philadelphia to California, we had to sit down and have a talk with our kids and say, y'all, church is gonna be real white, because they were not ready. And now our kids are 14 and 10 at that point. They were 4 and 10 maybe, or however they are. I don't know, y'all, whatever. They was little. And we was like, listen, people in church are going to be white. And they was like, we got white people in church now. We were like, no, guys, like everybody's gonna be white in church. Right? And that was like really difficult for them to grasp, especially my oldest daughter who's in church now, and people say things to her like, just talking, offhand, there aren't any black Mormons. And she's like, what? Hello, I'm here. Well, I mean you, but not a lot. And she's like, actually, because she comes from a place where half the ward was Mormon, right? So to her, she can't understand this dissonance, So as she's becoming more and more woke, she don't stand for the pledge. She always has something to say. She's very smart. She's really, she's pretty outspoken. I see a lot of work for people to do, but I see a lot of work for allies to do, because I'm tired.
Real tired.
I'm tired.
Yep.
I'm grateful for a husband that's a great ally, because my husband continues to stand, and he is tireless when I am tired, which is a burden that he needs. He needs to take it, right? Because he has no idea. So that is my challenge to white people here, is to be an ally. If you're thinking, what can I do? What should I be doing? I'm not necessarily the person to answer that for you, right? I'm not gonna be able to tell you your steps forward, but I would say dialogue with Rugh, dialogue with my husband, dialogue with Paul Reeves, because what we need right now is allies, because there's only so much that we can carry and shoulder and take. There's only so much more times that we can be in a lesson about the priesthood, them not say anything about the band, and we have to raise our hand again and say, what about this? We need white people standing up and saying that. We need white people saying, I think we should have a speaker for Black History Month. Why aren't we talking about black pioneers during Pioneer Day? If you're like my ward, you're my husband, you bring it up every week in ward council, and they still don't talk about it. Right?
Let me add something real quick. The Mormon Tabernacle Choir sang Lift Every Voice and Sing, so now we can sing it. Okay? Don't let a bishop tell you you can't sing that song. Now you can. Don't let that stop you.
So just really quick about the interesting thing in California, I had a person in our ward, we had a baby shower, and a lady in the ward was talking about schools, and she said, oh yeah, I assumed our school wasn't a good school because our kids are in the same school because they had a lot of black and brown people, which is common in California, a lot of diversity. And I said, what made you think it was not a good school? Because it had a lot of black and brown people, and schools that have a lot of black and brown people are usually not good schools. I was like, how? Like, who I was just like, you know, when somebody says something so crazy, you have to take a minute. Your eyes squint like you can't see very well, but you can, but you just, So I was with two other people, one out of Berkeley, who is very progressive, another who lived in Brooklyn and would tell you at every conversation that they lived in Brooklyn and how diverse Brooklyn was and Brooklyn. What did Brooklyn and Berkeley have to say? Nothing. And I said Brooklyn and Berkeley to Brooklyn and Berkeley, you guys are, you know black people, like you grew up in a diverse area, like how are you not saying anything to this conversation? Well, she's entitled to her opinion. That's what they said to me, she's entitled to her opinion. So I don't talk to her no more. Even though I had to serve with her in a calling for a little while. Fast forward a couple of years, now she's adopted 2 black kids. And in our ward is seen as very progressive because she has black children. Even though her ideas on race are completely and totally backwards, right? Yeah. So I just want to just send that out to you. A lot of things are still going down, but that we need allies. So I'll turn the time over to the audience for questions.
I've heard you say that you're tired and you need allies. And so as a white person, member of the church in a not very diverse ward, I've heard you say that I can speak out, and I'm willing to speak out every week. And I'm just looking for ideas from this group about how to be an ally, because I'm all in, and I'm with you, and I would like to know what more I can do to be your ally.
Thank you for that question. Brother Montgomery, you have anything live on the blog lately for white people? Dear white people?
We have our designated one.
Oh, I'm sorry, the go-to white person on the panel, my bad, I'm sorry.
We got one on
He's
deck.
the designated white person in my family, so I just go to him, but designated white person on the panel, that's right. Only one of y'all can speak.
Forgot we had one on deck.
One thing for sure, I definitely do not speak for all white people. I can tell you that right now. I'm a big believer in the theory that white people have to talk to white people and educate them, and that means that we have to educate ourselves first. I think we have to look at systems, see what systems we're participating in. Like Rob brought up, we're all in this system. We all, to some degree, derive advantage or disadvantage. And we need to institutionalize change. That was a subplot what I said, but we got to hardwire it. It can't be, so-and-so was here, that was great during that time. No, we got to hardwire change. So anytime we can do that to institutionalize change. Our dean, for example, got funding in perpetuity forever for the Civil Rights Seminar. So that will always be there. It will not depend on a white person being sympathetic to that. That will always be there forever. That's the type of thing that we have to do to hardwire change. And so, and many of you at BYU know he's been a leader on sexual assault and other issues. We have to have that integrity, and we can't just work harder because we're on this treadmill of fighting racism. White people get battle fatigue too. Obviously, they have to do a lot more work to get fatigue that people get from the daily fatigue they get who are not white. That can happen too. We have to work smarter and not harder. We have to work smarter and harder, and so we really need to have a vision. And if you look at the civil rights movement, people of faith have always been at the leading edge of that vision. And so their faith in God has propelled them, right? White people who have gone and given their lives, right? Along with other black folks that have been doing that since the beginning of the country. So we need that vision, right? I'm trying to give you true principles, right, to enact. And we need to, right, get involved in whatever system it is. Our family, our school boards. One last thing, we had a race relations and action group. It said, you know what, we got somebody of every race in our group. We're going to one-up that. We're going to invite somebody else of every other race. So we're going to have double the representation. And they're all going to tell their story, and then they're all going to teach true principles. And every person who came to that family home evening said it was the best one ever at BYU, ever, right? So we need creativity, we need vision, and we need to hardwire change into systems. Yep. And we need to be assets and earn the label of ally. We can never say we're allies. We have to earn that label by being an asset.
We cannot. LeBron James, right? I said you can't. LeBron James, you can't say that you're the king, and you got to prove you're the king. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So I would like to add to that we have a culture in the LDS Church that I see on a regular basis, not just in this format, but in everything, that will listen to a message, will feel the Spirit, will know it's right, will go home and will do nothing. That happens so much. It is sickening as a member of a stake presidency, because you'll have these meetings with bishops, you'll have these meetings with individuals, and they'll feel the Spirit, they'll know it's right, they'll want to do change, they'll go home, and the same thing happens. Nothing happens. And so what I would encourage you to do, if you feel passionate about this, first start in your ward. Let's try to do small things in your ward, and then do things in your community. Try to outreach there. Start there, right? Because if you don't start somewhere, then you'll end up doing like a lot of us do in the LDS Church. We'll learn something about ministering, and then we'll say, oh, I don't have to do anything anymore. I'm going to sit at home, right? And so that's what we have to do. Start by doing.
Can I say something too? I cannot tell you how many right now, as of right now, what's today, June 30th, 29th, one of them days, 2018, how many messages I have in my inbox from friends who say things like, I just want you to know that I love the stuff you post on Facebook, and I love that you're so involved, and I want to, but you know, right now my family, I'm just dealing with my family, and so they want me to know that they want change, but they don't want to do anything for the change. And they're not willing to leverage that privilege that they have. And so they're acknowledging to me when they say, but I can't do that because, and it should literally end with, I don't want to give up my privilege. Because I don't get to walk into a room and say, you know what, I ain't even going to be black today. I'm not going to do it. Because everyone gets to see me as black, right? And so if you claim to be an ally, yet no one knows it, sweetheart, you are not an ally. If nobody knows that you go to Black Lives, or if you don't even go, if you can't utter the words Black Lives Matter or the LGBTQ, whatever it is that you claim to be an ally with, and people have no idea that you are the ally of that group or whatever it is, sweetheart, you're not, okay? And so one of the things that's frustrating for me is the idea that y'all are still putting so much responsibility, and y'all are putting us on this pedestal like, oh my goodness, they're so incredible, look what they're doing. I could never. Because you know that you will be looked at as us. And back in the 50s and 60s and every other day, that was called an N-word lover, right? And that's the title that you don't want to have. But you need to have it if you're going to be an ally and you want to move this work together. I'm just saying.
Dr. King did say that the moderates are the worst.
Yeah.
The white moderate.
The white moderates are the worst.
That's excellent. I think we will end.
Throwing it out there.
I think we will end on that. That was excellent. I love it. Because we're a minute over our time.
See,
Can I say one conversation going?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in charge.
Sorry, I wanted to add this earlier. I just had a birthday. I'm 42. I need to clap for that.
You look good.
I look good for 42.
For your age.
I say that because I want you guys to think of this. On the day I was born, the day before I was born, it was legal in Missouri to kill a Mormon. Legal. It was legal. June 24th, 1976, it was legal to kill a Mormon on site. June 25th, 1976, my birthday, it became illegal to kill a Mormon on site. Missouri then issued an apology to the LDS Church for that, for having that in the books for such a long time. That was 2 years ago recently. I think we could probably do better, don't you think?
Yeah. Definitely. We can. Yep.